Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
I'll get the guns, the drugs from my generation. I'll take the fall, the stage, and across the nation. And it's a stage, the guns, the fake, the fraud, the messing with me. Come on, come on, come on. Let's get it out.
All right, come on in, sit down, put in whatever earbuds are your flavor of choice. We are not live in the studio apartment in Chicago, Illinois. We're actually coming in from a bi-coastal destination in which we wish for the weekend. But we are here. It's Tuesday. We survived the Groundhog Day. And apparently Snowmageddon has returned to New England.
It's about to return to Long Island too, so I'm prepping for that.
Baby, you're in New England.
What?
Long Island is in New England, honey.
Clearly this cold has destroyed me. Yeah,
yes, well, you also need to take vitamin D.
Yeah, your friendly neighborhood Christopher Walken impressionist here will not be doing another Walken impression tonight, though that would be fun to do, even though, Walken came on the show last week and told all our listeners to go fuck themselves. So, long story short, it's not going to happen.
No, not tonight. But we did get our Christopher Walken dose, if you will, during the Super Bowl. He was in the Kia commercial, and it was quite hysterical. So if you want the Walken fix for the night, it's on YouTube. You can look for Christopher Walken.
More Christopher Walken and Pokemon, less Amy Schumer and Seth Rogen. That's what I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
Yes.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Thank you, Keith.
Keith.
Getting that Walken taste.
But yes, it is us, your favorite wrestling lovebirds, Brandy and Robbie, and Keith is here because he's the entertaining one. Because he has all the clips. So this week we had a plan that we said we were going to cover wrestling romances this week because Valentine's Day is coming up on Sunday. Mm-hmm. However, we do have more pressing breaking news to cover. Yesterday on Twitter, Daniel Bryan announced that effective immediately he was retiring from professional wrestling and that he would elaborate on Raw last night, which he did. But apparently it was very, very closely kept because even the production people weren't told until Monday afternoon that this was happening, and they had to create the video packages.
It's funny. I was on Square Circle subreddit, and a lot of people were convinced that this was a work. Like, Bryan's going to come out and make an announcement that he's going to swerve people, or Kevin Owens or someone's going to come out and interrupt, and that's going to set the program. No, this was 100% legitimate, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yes. I mean, between my Tumblr timeline and my Twitter feed, it was about 50-50. People who resigned to it just because of everything that had been happening with his health, and 50% like, nah, man, this is a work. But yeah. I guess when he met the doctor in Pennsylvania around the Rumble time, they did some different testing that the other doctors had not done. And that's what led to his decision that because of the state of his brain and the rest of his body, that it would be better for him to retire before something serious happened.
And I didn't know how serious this issue was until Bryan was on ESPN SportsCenter with Jonathan Coachman. And I don't know if you saw the clip or not, but Bryan was talking to Coach, and he said that he had, quote-unquote, 10 documented concussions, possibly more, because according to Bryan, it's impossible for any athlete, whether they're in wrestling or what have you, to account for every single concussion because they're not clearly defined. And he also mentioned that he suffered from post-concussion seizures, which he hid from everyone and those came about because of lesions on his brain, which I
Hmm.
had no idea.
Yes, he said during, I did not see this clip, but when he was talking, when he came out at the end of the show, in the first 3 months of his career, he'd already had 5 concussions.
Yeah, and it goes to show just how little we knew about concussions at that time because he started like in the early aughts, and it
Hmm.
wasn't until, the Chris Benoit tragedy occurred that we started to become more familiar with concussions, their long-term impact, and it's good that we live in a time where we have more knowledge in relation to concussions.
This is true, but it's also, it doesn't change the fact that it's not fair.
Yeah,
It's sad. We have to watch a man who's in his mid 30s, I don't know how old he is, who's been doing this for almost the last 20 years of his life. This is all he's ever wanted to do, and now he can't anymore.
yeah. He did say that he has his family to think about. He likes to start his own family with Brie Bella, his wife, Brie Danielson. And what I liked about this retirement segment on Raw was that Brian was in high spirits. People were chanting yes, yes, and then Brian quips. That's what Bree says. And there's something to be said about a man who can make the most out of a unfortunate situation.
He did, and he cracked. That was one joke he cracked. The other that he cracked was when they started chanting no, when he said, "We need to talk about the elephant in the room." And he said, "No, I didn't want to cut my beard either." Because he recently not only cut his hair, but he cut his beard as well. And he grew out his hair and he donated it to one of those charities that makes wigs for children with cancer.
Yeah, Wigs for Kids,
And
I believe it is.
yeah, I there's so many I don't even remember, but and they don't charge the families anything. And wigs, good quality wigs are expensive, so that's very nice and it's very sweet. And I have to believe that not only was that just Brian's heart himself, but that was because of Connor. I know that has to be related.
Yeah, it shows that Brian, and as well as other WWE's talent, he's very philanthropic. He does good for people out of the kindness of his own heart, as opposed to any other uh, PR slant or PR gain, which we do see in sports and media quite a bit. But
Hashtag Stephanie McMahon.
I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to address the other elephant in the room. But yes,
I'll do it.
yeah, you'll do it.
Where she said that philanthropy was the future of PR. I'm
That
like,
that, that
no,
was
philanthropy is coming out of the good of your heart, you stupid wench.
yeah, that was like the worst publicity move of the last year in pro wrestling. Just I'm in marketing. I've been doing this for a few years now. Pro tip: don't go on Twitter and say that.
Mm-mm.
Just free advice. Free advice from me to anyone who would like to get involved in marketing or business in general.
Don't do that.
Yeah, but back to Brian.
Yes.
He also spoke about the people who have helped him in WWE as well as pro wrestling. Kane and William Regal. He touched on specifically because Kane. He and Brian were Team Hell No, which was it was almost like a precursor to New Day in terms of comedic tag teams that worked, and William Regal being Brian's, uh, you know, tutor, his mentor,
His
and
mentor from very early on. He started working with William Regal back when he was signed to WWE Developmental in Memphis back in 2001. So he and William Regal go a long, long time back.
yeah,
Like when you see Brian, like you see the pictures of him doing the neck bridges and stuff, that's William Regal.
and Regal actually helped Brian get the ring name Daniel Bryan. He
Hmm.
had Brian had a bunch of ring names, sort of tentative names, and Regal said, "Go with Daniel Bryan." It's simple and it's easy to chant.
It is, and it's a real play off of his name. His real name, which is what he went by on the Indies, is Brian Danielson. So it's really easy. People also call him one of his nicknames was the American Dragon. So a lot of his friends like Nigel McGuinness will just refer to him as Dragon or American Dragon.
And besides, I think Brian's a good name. I remember a lot of people back in 2010 not really liking it, but at the same time, it's like it could be worse. You could be Scotty Goldman.
It could have been worse. Exactly. You could have been Scotty Goldman. Speaking of Scotty Goldman, Colt Cabana, whose intro to the podcast I frequently jack, Daniel and Colt did the documentary, The Wrestling Road Diaries, before Daniel was signed to WWE. And it basically, they just took a camera on the road with them for like 3 months. And it's really interesting and it's really fun. It's available online. You can get it at coltmerch.com. You can get the physical disc, or you can go to digitalcolt.com and get the digital download, because pirating is bad, kids. Pirating is bad.
Yeah, support the guys and girls who make it all possible.
Exactly. And it gives you a really good insight just into Daniel as a person. His humor is fantastic. And like, I'm friends with a bunch of people on Twitter and Facebook from his indie days, like Bryce Remsburg, who's the head referee in Chikara, and he shared some stories about being stuck in a car with him and Claudio, and Daniel swore he was going to sleep and proceeded to be kept awake for the next 7 or 8 hours listening to Bryce and Claudio talk about girls.
It's good to have those stories, because I feel like we don't really get to hear a whole lot about wrestlers behind the scenes, their memories and things that they've gotten to do. And a lot of wrestlers sounded off after Bryan announced his retirement. Even CM Punk made a mention of it, which surprised me because the guy doesn't want anything to do with it. But he and Bryan do share that kinship.
They do. And with Bryan, it's special for Punk because they came from the same places. And they're the same type of, they're not big, they're not muscle men, and they weren't supposed to make it. And yet they're two of the biggest names WWE has ever had in our generation.
Yeah, and I think that's
so when he shared the picture of he and Bryan, or the GIF or whatever it was, I just saw a still image of it. But that's just signaling that he may have burned his bridge with wrestling for now, but the bridges that he built with the people that he ran up and down the roads with is still there.
And I think what makes this retirement speech sad, and here's the thing. After the segment was done, people were comparing it to Edge's and Ric Flair's retirement speeches and saying, oh, which one impacted you the most? Which one was the most emotional? And while Edge's and Ric Flair's were emotional, I would argue that Bryan's was more so, because when you look back at the runs that Edge and Ric Flair had, not just in pro wrestling, but WWE specifically, they had tremendous runs. They've had pretty long careers in WWE, especially, Ric Flair, considering how old he was during his last run.
When he finally fucking retired.
Yeah, exactly. And Bryan, people forget he wasn't in WWE for very long. He made his television debut on NXT back in 2010, and he officially retired in 2016. He was in WWE for a little more than half a decade, and you get the feeling that he could have accomplished more had his health been better, had he, had things been different. And I think that's one of the main reasons why this retirement speech was the most emotional, for me anyway, and it was for others.
I've seen that, comparing which one was more emotional, which one was more impactful. I think it's very, you can't quantify that. That's a very personal experience.
Yeah, and I think I think it's just because I've watched Bryan in WWE since the day he debuted, and seeing him grow as a not just as a wrestler, but as an overall performer. I think there is that that it's a personal thing.
It is. Like, this would be, as much as I love Bryan, this is number 2 for me. A very high number 2, but number 1 for me was when Shawn Michaels retired, because Shawn Michaels, ever since I was 3 and 4 years old, Shawn Michaels has always been my number 1, and that's part of why I wanted to get to know about Bryan, is because he did work with Shawn Michaels. And I wanted to know what Sean saw in him that made him special, because, that's always something you want to see, is what someone that you love, why they gravitate to certain people. You want to see the kinship.
You
And I I regret not. It's like with Nigel. I didn't get into Nigel's career until after he retired. I regret not becoming a fan of Bryan sooner. I really didn't know about wrestling outside of WWE before 2007, 2008. And that was just because of where I live. I wasn't very internet savvy for a long time. So, you look back on it, and hindsight's 2020. So if we had
Yeah.
known then what we know now.
Yeah, like right now I'm hooked on a lot of independent wrestling because I want to believe that the guys I watch, in other promotions will eventually get their big break in WWE like Bryan did. Bryan is one of those guys that helped to usher in, well, I wouldn't say usher in, but helped to support wrestlers of smaller statures, guys who might not have been the flashiest, but were the workhorses that they could succeed on a higher level and on a level that maybe they shouldn't have, but they still did.
Exactly. So you want to think about big guys in WWE now, or people that the fans really gravitate toward in WWE. CM Punk. Um, Obviously, they've broken about the same time. They've come from the same places. Both were former ROH champions, former world champions. Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose, Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, Cesaro.
Finn
Yeah,
Balor.
Finn Balor. These guys who were born and raised and rode up and down the road for many years, who weren't 6'5" and 250 jacked, looking like they just ran out of a juice bar. They're smaller, they're faster. They aren't the guys that are supposed to quote unquote make it according to the WWE mold.
Mhm.
And yet here they are now, and it's all because of Bryan.
It was because of his work, and as good of a wrestler as Bryan was and is, um, what I think helped him in the long run in WWE was his humor, was his
Mm-hmm.
charisma. Because for so long, he's always been criticized as, oh, he's a great wrestler, he's good in the ring, but I don't know, he just doesn't have the charisma. But Bryan built upon that over time, especially in WWE when he became the world heavyweight champion, became this overbearing heel. Then the storyline with AJ Lee, CM Punk. Then you got Team Hell No, which we touched on earlier. Uh, it I think Bryan proved a lot of naysayers wrong in that sense. That he could be funny, he could be entertaining on a level beyond just wrestling. And it's funny because I was recently rewatching those Team Hell No segments, the anger management ones in particular, and I didn't know this until later, but Bryan, he wanted to just crack up so much. He wanted a corpse because the whole segments were insane. But he managed to keep a straight face throughout the filming, and it wasn't until the cameras were off that he just busted up laughing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a professional right there.
It is. And part of it is that Bryan is a quiet person. He's a very, until you get to know him and get in and break down those walls, he's a very introverted person. And for him to open up like that and be able to tap into that inner, he loves to laugh. He loves to be funny. He's dorky. He's just a dude. And it's so cool to see someone like that get to where he did, because in the grand scheme of things, that's not the kind of guy that society thinks should make it, because he's just a dude.
And he's not the type of guy who is into the fame and fortune that media has to offer. Because I remember watching Total Divas very early on, and I remember seeing him, live in a very quaint home. There wasn't a television there. He doesn't seem to be somebody who's very involved in media. He doesn't really want to deal with the same sort of reality TV lifestyles that some of his friends and family have become involved in. which is respectful. I think when you become involved in TV to that level, I think you become jaded. You become maybe a little too full of yourself. And I'm glad that Brian was able to stay true to himself, because I think in the wrestling business or in any realm of entertainment, it's very hard to stick to your guns, which I think he did.
He definitely has. I mean, this is someone who got into wrestling not to make money, because obviously he didn't make very much until just recently. He got into it just because he loved it, and that's part of why so many of us can identify with him, because he loves pro wrestling, and that's all. And that's what we all do, is we love wrestling. That's the one thing, no matter how much we disagree and how we see things different ways, that's the one thing that we can all agree on. And that's the one thing we can identify in Brian, that we say, yes, he's one of us. He may be just a dude, but he's one of us. He's someone we'd invite to our viewing parties or we'd chat with on social media, because he's just a dude that loves wrestling.
And he's somebody who you could look at and say, I can do that too. Going from wrestling in dirty-ass high school gyms for pennies to main eventing WrestleMania, that's a pretty awesome journey. It's one that movies are made out of.
Indeed, and we'll get into those moments in just a few minutes. We're going to go to break right now, go grab a drink, and come back and enjoy your favorite Daniel Bryan memories. Only on the Hold 1005 podcast on Late Night Sports Radio.
Maybe I could offer up an answer.
Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.